It's amazing to me how John Calvin's critiques of the church back in the 1500s are so applicable for us today in the United States of America in 2020. Calvin spends a decent amount of time criticizing monasticism, or the practice of monks and nuns removing themselves from the churches, from the villages, and spending all of their time in prayer and fasting and study for the rest of their lives. And this is what Calvin writes about that, and we'll see how his wisdom applies to us today in monasticism, because that still exists today. I was just talking to a high school kid at a Catholic school who said he was going to become a monk for life. And that's what his goal was. He wasn't going to go to college or start a family or work a job. He just wanted to remove himself and become a monk. And so it's interesting to see how this applies to that, but also a different form of maybe new monasticism. This is what Calvin writes. It was a beautiful thing to forsake all their possessions and be without earthly care. But God prefers devoted care in ruling a household, where the devout householder, clear and free of all greed, ambition, and other lusts of the flesh, keeps before him the purpose of serving God in a definite calling. It is a beautiful thing to philosophize in retirement, far from interaction with men. But it is not the part of Christian meekness, as if in hatred of the human race, to flee to the desert and the wilderness, and at the same time to forsake those duties which the Lord has especially commanded. Though we grant there was nothing else evil in that profession, it was certainly no slight evil that it brought a useless and dangerous example into the church. So John Calvin says that it is a beautiful thing to forsake all earthly possessions, to show that you are not dominated by your stuff, that you are dominated by God and His will for your life. But he also says that God prefers Christians who have house and have stuff and have family and use all of those things for God's kingdom. And we see that example in the scriptures. There were people who had houses, which meant they were a little wealthier, and they used those houses for churches. They gathered people in the name of Christ to worship and to make disciples of each other. And he also says that it's not a bad thing to spend time alone and to reflect about life, to philosophize. But he also says that if you remove yourself completely, if you flee to the desert and the wilderness, you are removing yourself from your Christian duty and from your covenantal commitments to the church. And I am inspired by a lot of retired people in our church at Calvary that, yes, they kind of flee to the desert, they go to Arizona or Florida, but they are so committed to our church when they are here. And I know they are committed to churches down in Arizona or Florida when they are there. They are not removing themselves from their Christian duties or their responsibilities. And I encourage all of us to follow that suit, that when we grow older and maybe we have the financial means to retire, to not just to spend it on personal pleasure, but to stay committed to the church, to make disciples of our families, of our friends, and of our churches. So I think the new monasticism that we are confronted with is this retirement where I don't need to go to church. I can just maybe watch some online videos. I don't need to worry about anyone else. I just need to enjoy myself because I've earned it. That is not really biblical, and we don't see that example in the scriptures. The disciples, the prophets, the kings, the teachers, they were all involved in people's lives, growing closer to God and encouraging everyone else to walk with Christ.